Imagine waking up tomorrow morning. Everything around you looks exactly the same. The walls of your bedroom are the same familiar color. The morning light falls across the floor in the exact same way. You have the same job waiting for you. The same responsibilities weighing on your shoulders. The same people in your life. Nothing in your external world has changed at all. Except for one thing. The way you think. Would your life begin to change anyway? Think about it. Most people spend years, sometimes decades, trying to improve their income. They spend countless hours trying to improve their appearance. They try to upgrade their careers, their cars, their houses, and their relationships. But very few people spend dedicated time improving the one single thing that influences all of those areas. Their mind. Hello everyone. Welcome back to Daily English Podcast. Whether you are listening while walking through a park, driving to work, studying at your desk, exercising, cooking a meal, relaxing after a long day, or simply looking for a quiet moment to yourself, I am truly grateful you are here. Today's conversation is about the most powerful tool you will ever possess. Your mind. Before we go any further, I want to ask you a question. It is a question I want you to really think about. If you could improve only one thing about yourself over the next 5 years, what would you choose, and why? Take a moment to think about that. I would love for you to share your thoughts in the comments. We read every single one, and many of our future episodes are directly inspired by the community's experiences and stories. When we talk about the mind, we are not talking about simple positive thinking. We are not talking about standing in front of a mirror and telling yourself that everything is perfect when it is not. Life is complicated. Life can be difficult, unpredictable, and sometimes deeply unfair. Positive thinking often tries to ignore those realities. But training your mind is different. Training your mind is about building a strong foundation so that when the difficult moments come, you do not collapse. It is about realizing that your mind is the lens through which you experience the entire universe. If that lens is scratched, or dirty, or cracked, everything you look at will appear broken. But if you clean that lens, if you polish it and protect it, even the darkest situations can reveal hidden opportunities. Let me tell you about a man named Arthur. Arthur was an architect in his late 50s. He was highly successful, respected by his colleagues, and lived in a beautiful home. By all external measures, Arthur had won the game of life. But if you spent more than 10 minutes talking to Arthur, you would realize something was wrong. Arthur was exhausted. Not physically exhausted, but mentally drained. Every time a new project came across his desk, his brain immediately started searching for everything that could go wrong. He would look at a brilliant building design and only see the potential for water leaks, structural failures, and budget problems. When his daughter called to say she got a new job in a different city, Arthur did not congratulate her. Instead, he immediately started listing all the dangers of moving to a new place. He worried about the cost of living, the crime rate, and the stress of making new friends. Arthur loved his daughter deeply, but his mind had become a machine designed to find problems. For a long time, Arthur believed he was just being realistic. He thought he was protecting himself and the people he loved by anticipating danger. But that wasn't the real turning point for him. The real turning point came during a simple doctor's appointment, a moment we will come back to a bit later, because what the doctor told Arthur is something that applies to every single one of us. To understand what was happening to Arthur, we have to look at how the human brain is wired. For thousands of years, our ancestors survived because they paid attention to danger. If an early human was walking through a forest and heard a noise in the bushes, they didn't assume it was a friendly bird. They assumed it was a hungry tiger. The humans who assumed it was a tiger survived and passed on their genes. The humans who assumed it was just the wind did not survive. Because of this, modern humans have inherited a brain that is heavily biased toward the negative. Psychologists call this the negativity bias. Your brain is constantly scanning your environment for threats, insults, and problems. It is not doing this to make you miserable. It is doing this to keep you safe. But here is the problem. You are no longer living in a dangerous forest. Most of the threats you face today are not hungry tigers. They are unpaid bills, difficult emails, social media arguments, and fear of failure. Your brain, however, reacts to a stressful email the exact same way it reacts to a physical threat. Your heart beats faster. Your breathing becomes shallow. Your mind races. If you do not consciously train your mind to recognize the difference between a real physical threat and a psychological inconvenience, you will spend your entire life feeling like you are being chased by tigers. This brings us to a fundamental truth about human existence. The quality of your life is not determined by what happens to you. It is determined by what you pay attention to. Attention is the most valuable currency you have. Every day, you wake up with a limited amount of attention. How you spend it determines how you feel. Think about a young woman named Clara. Clara is a university student studying graphic design. She is incredibly talented, but she has a habit that is slowly destroying her confidence. Every morning, before she even gets out of bed, Clara reaches for her phone. She opens a social media app and begins to scroll. Within 5 minutes, she has looked at pictures of a friend on a luxury vacation, a famous designer winning a major award, and a fitness model with what seems like a perfect body. Without realizing it, Clara has just spent her first morning currency. She has paid for feelings of jealousy, inadequacy, and stress. Before her feet have even touched the floor, her mind has already decided that she is not successful enough, not attractive enough, and not traveling enough. Clara believes that she is just relaxing. She thinks she is just catching up on the world. But there is another reason most people never notice the damage this causes. The brain is incredibly efficient. Whatever you repeat, the brain makes permanent. Imagine walking through a field of tall grass. The first time you walk through it, it is difficult. The grass is high, and you have to push your way forward. But if you walk that exact same path every single day, the grass eventually dies down. The dirt becomes hard and flat. You have created a trail. Soon, you don't even have to think about where you are walking. You just automatically follow the path. This is exactly what happens in your brain. Scientists call it neuroplasticity. When you think a thought, a network of neurons fires in your brain. If you think that same thought over and over again, those neurons wire together. They create a physical pathway. If you wake up every day and look for reasons to feel inadequate, your brain builds a superhighway for inadequacy. Soon, you won't even need social media to feel bad about yourself. Your brain will automatically find reasons to feel terrible because that is the path of least resistance. But this is also the most beautiful and hopeful discovery in modern science. Because the opposite is also true. If you can build a pathway for anxiety, you can also build a pathway for peace. If you can build a pathway for self-doubt, you can build a pathway for confidence. It simply requires you to become the architect of your own mind. You have to start walking a different path through the grass. I want you to try something right now. Wherever you are, just look around the space you are in. I want you to spend the next 10 seconds looking for everything that is the color red. Look closely. Find a red book, a red car outside the window, a red piece of clothing, a red light on an electronic device. Keep looking for red. Fix it in your mind. Now, keeping your eyes open, I want you to answer this question. How many blue things did you see? Chances are, you didn't notice the blue things at all. They were right there in front of you. They existed in your reality. But because your mind was entirely focused on finding red, the color blue practically disappeared. This is exactly how your mind works in daily life. If you wake up and tell your brain to look for everything that is annoying, frustrating, and unfair, your brain will gladly find it for you. You will find the driver who cuts you off in traffic. You will notice the coworker who speaks too loudly. You will see the dirty dishes in the sink. But in the process, you will completely miss the blue. You will miss the beautiful sunrise. You will miss the friendly smile from a stranger. You will miss the fact that you are healthy, breathing, and alive. We are constantly filtering the world through our beliefs. A belief is simply a thought that you have thought so many times that you forgot it was just a choice. Think about a man named Julian. Julian is a chef. For his entire life, Julian carried a belief that he was terrible at managing money. He used to say it out loud all the time. He would laugh and tell his friends, "I'm an artist, I just don't understand numbers." Because he believed this, his behavior naturally followed. He never looked at his bank accounts. He avoided opening letters from the tax office. Whenever he had extra money, he spent it immediately because he believed he was going to lose it anyway. Julian's belief became his reality. His brain constantly looked for evidence to prove that he was bad with money. If he made a mistake with his budget, his brain would say, "See? I told you so. You are terrible at this." Psychologists call this confirmation bias. Your brain does not like to be wrong. Once it decides that a belief is true, it will actively ignore any evidence to the contrary, and it will highlight any evidence that supports the belief. So, how did Julian break this cycle? How do any of us change the beliefs that are quietly controlling our lives? It starts with a very simple, but profound shift. It starts with learning to talk to yourself differently. Most of us have an inner voice. It is that silent narrator in your head that is reading these words right now. It is the voice that comments on your clothes when you look in the mirror. It is the voice that tells you what to say during a meeting. For many people, that inner voice is incredibly cruel. It is a harsh critic. We say things to ourselves that we would never, ever say to a friend. If a friend makes a mistake, we usually say, "Don't worry about it, you'll do better next time." Everyone makes mistakes. But if we make a mistake, our inner voice says, "You are so stupid. You always do this. You are a failure." This harsh inner dialogue is not a sign of high standards. It is a sign of an untrained mind. If you want to change your life, you have to change the way you talk to yourself. You have to fire the harsh critic and hire a compassionate coach. Let's return to the story of Arthur, the architect who saw problems everywhere. Remember that he went to a doctor's appointment. Arthur was experiencing high blood pressure, terrible headaches, and insomnia. The doctor ran several tests, but physically, there was nothing seriously wrong with his heart or his brain. The doctor, who had known Arthur for many years, put down his chart, looked Arthur in the eye, and said something that changed his life. He said, "Arthur, your body is healthy. But your body is reacting to a mind that is living in a constant state of emergency. You have trained yourself to see every situation as a disaster that hasn't happened yet. Your body cannot tell the difference between a real disaster and an imagined one. You are poisoning your own physical health with your thoughts." Arthur was shocked. He had never considered that his intelligence, his ability to foresee problems, was actually a weapon he was using against himself. The doctor challenged Arthur to do a simple exercise every day for a month. He told Arthur that whenever he noticed a problem in a design or in his life, he was allowed to acknowledge it. But immediately after, he had to force his brain to identify 3 possible solutions, or 3 positive aspects of the situation. At first, Arthur hated this exercise. It felt fake. It felt unnatural. When he looked at a flawed building plan, his brain screamed that it was a disaster. Forcing himself to find solutions felt like walking through that tall grass for the very first time. It required massive effort. But Arthur was disciplined. He kept doing it. He forced his brain to look for the color blue. Gradually, over weeks and months, something incredible happened. The neural pathways in his brain began to change. The superhighway of anxiety started to fade, and a new pathway of problem-solving and optimism began to grow. Arthur didn't lose his edge as an architect. He still saw the flaws. But he no longer felt a sense of panic when he saw them. He felt a sense of curiosity. His inner dialogue shifted from, "This is a disaster," to, "This is an interesting puzzle, how can we fix it?" This small shift in his mind changed everything. His blood pressure dropped. His relationships improved. He started sleeping through the night. His circumstances hadn't changed. The problems still existed. But the mind processing those problems had transformed. This leads us to one of the most vital skills you can develop in your lifetime. Emotional regulation. Many people believe that emotions are things that just happen to us. We think that an event happens, and it automatically triggers an emotion. Someone insults us, and we are automatically angry. We lose a job, and we are automatically depressed. But thousands of years ago, wise thinkers in ancient Greece and Rome realized this was a misunderstanding of how the human mind works. They practiced a philosophy that suggested something entirely different. They argued that it is not external events that cause our distress, but rather our judgments about those events. Between the things that happen to you and your reaction to those things, there is a space. It might be a very tiny space. It might only last a fraction of a second. But in that space lies your freedom. In that space lies your power to choose your response. Imagine a young mother named Sarah. Sarah is trying to work from home while taking care of her 4-year-old son, Leo. She is stressed, tired, and facing a strict deadline for a project. She is typing furiously on her laptop when suddenly, she hears a loud crash from the kitchen. She runs in and sees that Leo has accidentally knocked over a large plant. There is soil everywhere. The pot is broken. Water is spreading across the floor. Sarah's immediate instinct is to yell. Her brain senses a disruption, a problem, and a threat to her work deadline. The anger rises in her chest instantly. The pathway for yelling and frustration is well worn and deeply established. But what if Sarah had been practicing the art of the pause? What if, in that tiny space between seeing the mess and opening her mouth, she took one deep breath? In that 1 second, she could observe her own mind. She could realize, I am feeling frustrated because my time is limited. But my son did not do this to hurt me. He is just a curious child who made a mistake. If Sarah can expand that space, she can change the entire trajectory of her afternoon. She can choose to kneel down, check if Leo is safe, and say, wow, that's a big mess. Let's clean it up together. The mess is exactly the same. The lost time is exactly the same. But the emotional reality in that house is completely different. All because of a 1-second pause inside a trained mind. We spend so much time reacting to life. We react to emails, to breaking news, to traffic, to the moods of other people. When we live entirely in a state of reaction, we give away our power. We let the external world dictate our internal weather. If the world is sunny, we are happy. If the world is stormy, we are miserable. But a truly strong mind acts as its own weather system. A strong mind can remain calm and focused even when the world outside is chaotic. How do we build this kind of mental resilience? We build it through intentional friction. We build it by challenging ourselves on purpose. Think about a man named David. David is a passionate runner. For years, he ran 5 miles every single morning. It was his meditation, his joy, and his identity. But one day, David suffered a severe knee injury. The doctor told him he could not run for at least a year, maybe longer. David was devastated. His entire routine was broken. Without his morning run, his mind began to spiral into darkness. He became irritable, depressed, and hopeless. He felt like his identity had been stolen from him. David's mind was telling him a story. The story was, without running, I have no way to relieve stress. Without running, I will become unhealthy. Without running, my life is worse. He completely believed this story. But eventually, the pain of his depression became worse than the pain in his knee. David decided he had to take control of his mind. He couldn't change his knee. The reality of his injury was out of his control. But he realized that how he interpreted that injury was completely up to him. David decided to view his injury not as a tragedy, but as an assignment. He asked himself a powerful question: what is this situation uniquely preparing me for? By changing the question, he changed the focus of his brain. His brain stopped looking for reasons to be sad, and started looking for opportunities. David realized that he had always wanted to learn to play the guitar, but he never had the time because he was always running. He realized he had neglected his upper body strength. He realized he hadn't read a book in months. David started using the hour he used to spend running to practice the guitar and lift weights. He poured his energy into learning a new skill. It was difficult and frustrating at first. His fingers hurt, and he was terrible at making the right chords. But he persisted. The discipline he had learned from running, he transferred to his mind. A year later, David's knee finally healed. He was cleared to run again. But the David who returned to the running path was a different man. He was stronger, both physically and mentally. He was now a runner who could also play the guitar beautifully. When people asked him about his injury, he didn't complain about the lost year. He smiled and said, "Breaking my knee was one of the best things that ever happened to me. It forced me to discover a part of myself I didn't know existed." This is the ultimate power of the human mind. The ability to reframe reality. The ability to take a piece of coal and squeeze it until it becomes a diamond. This is not about being blind to pain. David suffered. He was angry. He grieved the loss of his running. But he did not stay there. He used his mind to build a bridge out of the darkness. If we want to build this kind of mind, we must become fiercely protective of what we allow into it. Imagine your mind is a beautiful, fertile garden. The soil is incredibly rich. Whatever seeds you plant in this soil will grow. The soil does not judge the seeds. If you plant the seeds of beautiful flowers, you will grow a beautiful garden. If you plant the seeds of poisonous weeds, you will grow a field of poison. The garden simply returns what you give it. Every single day, you are planting seeds. Every conversation you have is a seed. Every book you read is a seed. Every hour you spend watching angry political debates on television is a seed. Every time you listen to a friend gossip and complain, you are letting them plant weeds in your garden. Many of us are incredibly careless with our mental gardens. We would never leave the front door of our house wide open for strangers to walk in and throw trash on our living room floor. Yet, we leave the doors of our minds wide open all day long. We scroll through endless feeds of violence, outrage, and comparison, allowing algorithms to dump trash directly into our consciousness. And then we wonder why we feel anxious, tired, and disconnected. Protecting your mind means setting strict boundaries. It means being conscious of your media diet. Just as eating junk food every day will eventually destroy your physical health, consuming mental junk food will destroy your psychological health. You must intentionally seek out high-quality mental nutrition. You need to read things that challenge you to think deeper. You need to listen to conversations that inspire you. You need to surround yourself with people who talk about ideas, rather than people who only talk about other people. You need to carve out moments of absolute silence in your day, allowing the dirt in your mental water to settle so you can see clearly again. This brings us to a concept that often gets lost in our modern, fast-paced world: the power of deep, unbroken focus. We live in an age of constant interruption. Your phone rings. An email notification pops up. A text message demands an immediate reply. We have trained our brains to expect a new piece of stimulation every few seconds. Because of this, our attention spans are shrinking. We find it difficult to read a long article, let alone a book. We find it hard to sit quietly and simply think about a problem for more than 3 minutes without reaching for a screen. But all of the greatest achievements in human history, every beautiful piece of art, every major scientific breakthrough, every deeply meaningful relationship, requires sustained attention. Love requires attention. If you are sitting across from your partner at dinner, but your mind is thousands of miles away, thinking about a work email, you are not really there. You are physically present, but psychologically absent. You are starving the relationship of the attention it needs to survive. To reclaim your mind, you must reclaim your attention. This requires deliberate practice. I want you to imagine yourself right now in a quiet room. Imagine that you have a blank piece of paper in front of you. Think of one problem that has been bothering you recently. Maybe it is a decision you need to make about your career. Maybe it is a conflict with a friend. Imagine sitting there, looking at the paper, and deciding that you are not going to move for 15 minutes. You are not going to check your phone. You are not going to turn on the music. You are just going to sit with the problem and let your mind work on it. At first, your brain will panic. It will beg you for distraction. It will tell you that you urgently need to check the weather, or look at the news, or clean the kitchen. But if you sit through that initial discomfort, something magical happens. The surface noise fades away. Your deeper thoughts, the thoughts that contain real wisdom and creativity, begin to rise to the surface. You start connecting ideas you hadn't connected before. You realize that the problem is not as complicated as it seemed when you were distracted. Clarity is the reward for sustained attention. Let me introduce you to an extraordinary woman named Elena. Elena is 72 years old. For most of her life, she worked as a bookkeeper. She was practical, organized, and lived a very routine life. When her husband passed away, Elena found herself alone in a quiet house. Her children were grown and lived far away. The silence of the house was deafening. Many people in Elena's situation allow their minds to slowly shut down. They retreat into the past, watching old television shows and waiting for time to pass. But Elena made a different choice. She decided that as long as she was breathing, her mind was still alive, and it needed to be used. She decided to learn Italian. She had never been to Italy, and she didn't know anyone who spoke the language. But she was fascinated by the sound of it. Her friends told her she was crazy. They said, "Elena, at our age, the brain just doesn't learn new things like that. You're wasting your time." They were repeating a very common, and very dangerous, myth. For a long time, scientists believed that the human brain stopped developing after childhood. They thought that by the time you were an adult, your brain was fixed, like concrete that had dried. But modern neuroscience has proven this completely wrong. Your brain remains plastic and adaptable until the very end of your life. It is true that learning might take a bit more effort as we get older, but the capacity for growth never disappears. The only thing that stops the brain from growing is a lack of challenge. Elena ignored her friends. She downloaded a language app. She bought a grammar book. She started labeling items around her house with Italian words. The mirror became lo specchio. The table became il tavolo. She practiced every single day. She stumbled, she forgot words, she felt foolish. But she laughed at her own mistakes and kept trying. 3 years later, at the age of 75, Elena traveled to Florence, Italy, by herself. She navigated the train stations, ordered food in local restaurants, and had wonderful, slow conversations with shop owners in beautiful, accented Italian. She didn't just learn a language. She built a stronger, more resilient brain. She proved to herself that her mind was still a vibrant, expanding universe. Elena's story highlights a critical component of a powerful mind: curiosity. Curiosity is the antidote to fear, and the cure for boredom. When you are genuinely curious, you cannot be angry. Have you ever noticed that? If someone strongly disagrees with your political opinion, and you get angry, communication stops. You start shouting, and they start shouting. But if you can replace that anger with curiosity, if you can genuinely ask, that is a fascinating perspective. Can you explain to me how you arrived at that conclusion? Everything changes? The defense mechanisms drop. The mind opens up. Curiosity keeps you young. It keeps you engaged with the world. Think about a child. Children are naturally curious. They ask why hundreds of times a day. Why is the sky blue? Why do dogs bark? Why does the moon follow us? They are desperate to understand the mechanics of the world. But as we grow older, we stop asking why. We accept things as they are. We assume we know enough to get by, and our minds slowly go to sleep. To awaken your mind, you must reignite that childhood curiosity. You must start looking at your daily life with fresh eyes. Next time you take a walk, don't just put in your headphones and stare at the ground. Look up. Notice the architecture of the buildings you pass. Wonder about the people who built them. Notice the different types of trees. Wonder how their root systems connect beneath the soil. Look at the faces of strangers and realize that every single person walking past you is living a life as complex, emotional, and vivid as your own. They have their own secret sorrows, their own private victories, and their own deep fears. Recognizing this creates empathy, and empathy is the sign of a highly evolved mind. Let us bring all of these threads together. We have explored how your mind filters reality. We have seen how your inner dialogue shapes your beliefs. We understand that your attention is a currency, and your emotions are not dictating your reality, but responding to your judgments. We have seen the power of neuroplasticity, the importance of deep focus, and the magic of lifelong curiosity. But knowing these things is not enough. Information is not transformation. Transformation only happens through daily, consistent practice. You cannot go to the gym once, lift a heavy weight, and expect to be strong forever. Mental strength works exactly the same way. It is a daily practice of pulling the weeds from your mental garden. It is the daily discipline of noticing when your inner voice is being cruel, and consciously choosing to speak to yourself with kindness. It is the daily effort to put down the screen and give your full attention to the people you love. It is the courage to face a difficult situation and ask, "What can I learn from this?" Remember Clara, the student who started her morning scrolling through social media? What if she decided to change just the first 10 minutes of her day? What if, instead of reaching for her phone, she kept a notebook by her bed? What if she woke up, opened the notebook, and wrote down 3 things she was genuinely looking forward to that day? The physical act of writing forces the brain to slow down. It forces the brain to search for the good. By changing the very first input of her day, she changes the trajectory of her entire morning. The grass on the pathway of inadequacy begins to grow back, and the pathway for gratitude gets wider and stronger. Remember Julian, the chef who believed he was terrible with money? What if he stopped repeating that story? What if he replaced the sentence "I don't understand numbers" with "I am learning how to manage my resources"? It is a small shift, but it removes the identity of failure and replaces it with the identity of a learner. As a learner, he is allowed to make mistakes. He can sit down for 15 minutes a week, open his bank app, and just look at it without panic. Over time, the mystery of the numbers fades, replaced by understanding and control. Every single one of the people in these stories, Arthur, Sarah, David, Elena, Clara, and Julian, discovered that their life circumstances did not have to dictate their internal peace. They discovered that they were not prisoners of their past, nor victims of their genetics. They were the active architects of their own minds. And so are you. Right now, as you listen to my voice, your brain is processing these words. You are forming new connections. You are evaluating how these ideas fit into your own life. You are already engaging in the work of mental expansion. The goal of this episode is not to make you feel bad for having negative thoughts. Having negative thoughts is part of the human experience. It is what our brains naturally do. The goal is to help you realize that you do not have to believe every thought you have. You do not have to blindly follow every emotion you feel. You can step back. You can observe. You can choose. Imagine your future self, 5 years from now. Imagine that for the next 5 years, you took absolute care of your mind. You protected your attention. You challenged your limiting beliefs. You learned new things. You practiced emotional regulation. Who would that person be? How would they stand? How would they speak? How would they handle a crisis? That version of you already exists as a possibility. But the only way to meet that person is to start building the bridge today. Every thought you choose, every boundary you set, every moment of focus you practice, is a brick in that bridge. As we come to the end of our time together today, I want to take you back to the very beginning. Imagine waking up tomorrow morning. Everything around you looks exactly the same. The same room. The same job. The same responsibilities. The same people. Nothing in your life has changed. Except one thing. The way you think. You wake up, and instead of dreading the day, you feel a quiet sense of readiness. You look at a problem, and instead of panic, you feel curiosity. You face a setback, and instead of despair, you find resilience. Your world hasn't changed its shape, but you have changed your lens. And because you have changed your lens, the world itself feels entirely new. If today's conversation gave you a new way of thinking, I'd love to hear from you. What's one habit that has made your mind stronger? Or what's one mental habit you'd like to change? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Someone reading your story might discover exactly the encouragement they need today. If you enjoyed spending this time together, please like this video and subscribe to Daily English Podcast for more meaningful conversations about psychology, personal growth, and everyday life. Thank you for listening. Take care of yourself. Protect your mind. Feed it with good ideas. Challenge it with new experiences. Trust it enough to keep growing. And remember, your greatest investment will never be found in a bank account. It begins inside your own mind. I'll see you in the next episode of Daily English Podcast.